The anime begins. Sorry, this is the story of Kagenou, a boy who, like everything else, always dreamed of becoming a superhero. But unlike the rest of mortals who forget their dreams, he never left it behind. He acted as a background character and always kept training and studying all types of martial arts, becoming a master. Pappy Crack also learned all types of magic spells that were in fantasy stories. He even physically trained his body using weights in his clothes. Yes, very Rockland style. However, he continues to seek even more power because he is totally useless in the face of an atomic bomb or even in the face of simple bullets, as he himself mentions. Here we also meet Nishino, a very famous girl involved in the world of entertainment. Here in our protol, he brings her all angry. Well, despite being ultra famous, our protagonist always tells him he calls with other names, plus Kage. He doesn't constantly send dialogues ref flashers that give cry. Well, he treats everyone like NPCs. Yes, more or less like your friend Taku who thinks he's the protagonist of an anime. Although in this case, I think it applies. Kino doesn't have friends. He is alone all the time, and we could consider him the perfect background character. Mysterious Rem, with below average grades even without notable athletic skills, which obviously means that Nishi doesn't bother anymore. But he has to keep his sanity when he is a public figure, almost as big as Kun Little Thing. One day, Nishin would not stay at the end of classes. She would listen to our protagonist's piano that sets the mood for what is coming. She, as usual, was waiting for her driver who was busted by some very bad guys, all atheists. Since they did not answer her cell phone, she decides to return home on foot. It happens that our protagonist would see from above while he was walking along the road. He would feel that someone was watching him. However, that would be the least of his problems. Well, he would be intercepted by some subjects, bad guys that I mentioned to you who end up sleeping. Kagenou's face being the last thing she would see, she would wake up tied up in a warehouse where these guys seek to extort money from her family and make them pay for the ransom. Kagen would not have followed them. She would take off the pieces, and she would put on a supersuit. Meanwhile, the Antichrist gangster would reveal to us that she was previously kidnapped by someone lying next to her, and when things were going to get Kage, she would not jump from the roof, all in madness, presenting herself as a Sishscan slayer, killing the first guy but the secondly. He reveals that he is an ex-military man and is looking for a little excitement. So, Kage doesn't tell him, "Get ready because you're going to have a bad time because I'm going to give you a morbid dance. You won't even know where you're standing." The fight would start, and Kage wouldn't be knifed, and when the second knife was going to fall, he would use some levers which he used to destroy the criminal's wrists, something he learned from beating up the motorcycle gangs. Also, to kill him would be not without first freeing Nishin, and Kage would not say to himself that yes, an ex-military man caused him so many difficulties, he will never be able to become an eminence in the shadows. The next morning he would not meet our protagonist again, who this time does call him by his name, so everything is happiness, everything is love, everything is an innocent man killed. Our protagonist received the Kun truck because he mistook the light of said truck for magical power, which ended with his deviation, reincarnating in a magical world where he would continue his path to absolute power, where he formed an organization called Shadow Garden with more than 650 waifus, becoming Kagenou and a total eminence in the shadows. But let's go to the beginning to find out how he became the biggest there after the favor that the truck did him. Kun would reincarnate as the youngest son of the male Kagenou, even reincarnated under the same last name. Plot conveniences. Our protagonist would pretend to cry so that they would not see him as such a strange baby. He would notice that everything there has magical energy, saying to himself, likewise, now he will be able to claim all that overwhelming power for himself. We know that his family produces many dark knights, great fencers who improve their abilities, physical abilities using magic. Older sister is called Clara and is Hope, the pride of her family. Enters who shits is not happy being the background character with a background character named Cid Kagenou. However, in the shadows, she is a total eminence who fights with bandits and kills them with his slime, something that formed thanks to the knowledge he brought from the other world. Although well, a bandit would attack him from behind, killing our protagonist. In reality, Kage is totally insane because he only faked his death, complaining to the bandit for not lasting 2 minutes. 2 minutes? Maybe it's a Star Wars marathon. Calm down, champion. 2 minutes, it's a hell of a king. But our pro would find you a really ugly monster who apparently is possessed, feeling a great magical charge that comes from that, so he decides to take it so he can do experiments trying all kinds of things and shooting magical charges at her. However, a month later she managed to contain the magical charge of the possessed woman, resulting in an ultra beautiful elf. Who will possibly become CR? Thank you, Young. It seems that she will take the opportunity to make her first performance as the Eminence of the Shadows, putting herself in a highly conspiratorial mode, highly fun, highly liberating, because he tells her that he has just freed her from her curse, a curse that they cast on the descendants of the ancient heroes. The fact is that a tremendous story is sent, a tremendous flash ref story based on a story that they tell children to sleep about a demon called Devils, and the 3 heroes who defeated him basically tells her that they cast said curse on her, but calm beauty, and thanks to my firm breasts and formed buttocks I just rescued you. The elf asks him, who Kodas did that to her? Which is why Kagenou, looking at a bottle called the Cult of Devils, would tell her that it is conveniently the organization that seeks to revive the demon king Diablos and that they did evil to him. The betrayal of her, which is why Kage has not taken the mission to defeat them, presenting herself for the first time as Shadow. The one who lurks in the shadows to hunt the shadows created a tremendous scene. Although obviously everything is a lie and she just made it up. But the important thing is that the elf believes it and is willing to fight next to him, very immersed in the role. He tells him that they will have to grow their organization and raise a lot of funds. Shadow would tell him that his new organization will be called Shadow Garden or the Garden of Shadows. For those who are not international like me, our protagonist is also, he will name her Alpha. 3 years have passed since then. Our protagonist is already 13 years old and continues to remain the future ordinary and normal knight. Well, while he fights with his sister, he would tell us that fencing in that world is unsophisticated, which means that we are very broken. And although they have the ability to break it, he continues his role as a background character. Shadow does not explain that when they turn 15 they go to the Midgar Academy to become Dark Knights in the royal capital, and the day his sister had to undertake this trip she would be kidnapped, which is not explained by her father because in theory she is an extremist ultra broken ultra high dementia. Our protos would go from that room and talk to Beta, a girl that he rescued in the same way as Alpha. Well, yes. Shadow rescued 7 more girls of his curse, and obviously, the slave, the tail, seeing them known as the 7 shadows that inform him that Clara was kidnapped by the Cult of Devils. Since they supposedly thought that Clara could belong to the descendants of the ancient heroes, who does not think that the shadows they are Rusin, and they think that even the smallest bandit belongs to said cult. Although in reality, there is a hidden saying with the objective that the protagonist said. Only that our protagonist does not know it yet. He continues to believe that it is a flashy ref story that was invented. We change the scene and we see Clara, who is chained, and says that everything he has learned and evolved has been from fighting with his brother, although he never learns anything. The bad guy on duty threatens him to go after his younger brother, with which Clara would brutally break the chains, hurting her own wrists, because for her younger brother is everything. What a great sister, but she sends her to sleep with a punch of gender equality, then to notify the Melandro that intruders have arrived, who apparently are 7 girls, because the works are crazy that they annoy everyone as if nothing was happening. They introduce themselves as Shadow Garden and say that they are coming to break the devil cult's mother. He is surprised that they have heard such a secret name, so ultra hidden. He would find himself taking some red pills and would break the floor to escape, meeting Shadow out of convenience and just passing by. He would attack Shadow, who is infinitely superior, seeing him as being with great ease. The power-up he had 2 minutes ago would end up being indifferent, and the thing is that Kagero never saved his sister, but instead, he let herself feel the adrenaline of escaping. And so she can reach her house alone, leaving. Now towards the royal capital, and at sunset the shadows would go to see him to say goodbye. They tell him that it is to put an end to the Cult of Devils, that is a very large world organization, and well, they would fight with that, basically. Although, well, Master Protagonist thinks that they told him all that to hide that supposedly they already realized that the cult of devils is a hoax that was invented so they could not continue with that farce forever, thinking that it is the most mature decision. For which we return to the present. Our protagonist is already 15 years old and is heading to the royal capital to enter the Dark Knight Academy of Midgar. And although now he believes he is alone, his objective has not changed. He wants to become an eminence in the shadows and in the capital of Midgar, where there are 1 million inhabitants. Our protagonist, despite being a background character, managed to enter the same academy that his sister lives in, a cheap apartment in the center. Since in that institution they are divided by social classes. In addition, he got a couple of friends that he handpicked with the most NPCs characteristics possible. They literally have no influence on the plot at all. They are totally disposable. All of their names are Poikel, who talk on the train about the big difference in the treatment of students who come from lower noble families, as is the case with them, since those from the upper nobility can stay in the dormitories at the academy in addition to the honor students, as is the case with the older sister of Kagenou. Basically, you have to be broken to stand out. Well, the 9 of his friends tell him that our protagonist must fulfill the penance that consists of confessing his love to one of the most desired to the most wanted to the most academy, and then being brutally rejected, being the canonical event that every character should experience and more of a background character. Furthermore, our protagonist is not against it. He always wanted to experience rejection, which is why he decides to go and confess to Alexia, the second princess of the kingdom of Midgar, who is already compromised by a political agreement, and after seeing how they reject a bro, our prot would go to declare himself doing the best performance of nerves me and little confidence that he could be a background character. He would wait for the rejection, but thanks to the privileges of the protagonist, Alexia would accept his proposal. Well, she says that she was waiting for someone like him, accepting our protagonist, who did not want to even approach the path of a protagonist, since now he became the center of everyone's attention by dating the princess, becoming the pride of his friends, and they recommend him to create beautiful memories with Alexia, who arrives at that moment to be able to eat with her boyfriend. But our prot tries to look like a pig and that Alexia is disappointed in him, but she only ends up inviting him to train fencing with her because he is very bad at that. Aha, we changed the scene to Kage wouldn't arrive with what we found out that the instructor is Alexia's fiancé. His name is Enon, and practice Kage wouldn't realize that his waifu's movements are slow and almost no they use magic. The technique is very refined and avoids any excess, considering that her fencing is beautiful. Alexia would try to give her fiancé a little jealousy, which you wouldn't mind, and in the afternoon, she confronted him, saying that she was just looking for a lower-class nobleman. In order to manipulate him, something that Alexia admits, he says he doesn't want to get into trouble, but when he sees a gold coin he says, "I look like someone you can buy with money if necessary," which is why he agrees to continue this fake relationship. He acts as her boyfriend, and in exchange, she gives him money after each day. So several days would pass. She would name her new puppy Pochi, and our Poch would be invited to say yes to everything she says today. If she starts talking seriously, she fears losing her role as background character Alexia would take him to eat a lotto, and on top of that he pays him for the day. Where do I sign? The thing is that Kagenou doesn't understand why Alexia doesn't want to be with Xenon, that he is a badass at his academy, a flawless person, but she says that normally they are the craziest, would spend 2 more weeks with the same routine. Alexia would say that she hates her fencing, referring to the protagonist, because it is too simple. She would confess that she is her sister's shadow since she is not as strong as her, and that is why they call her the ordinary fencer. Kagenou tells Alexia that he likes her style of fencing, referring to Alexia's style. Seeing the same words that her sister used to console her after defeating her are why she hates simple fencing. Kage doesn't tell her that if tomorrow she dies 1 million people wouldn't care, but he doesn't tolerate others belittling what he likes. In this case, it's Alexia's fencing style. How romantic. The next morning, some guards would arrest Kagenou because Alexia never returned to her bedroom. So she is missing, and the main suspect is Kagenou, being the last person who was with her, and they need to interrogate him. Where is Alexia, you will ask yourself? Obviously, kidnapped. Alexia would get up handcuffed and she would see next to her a kind of demon. Damn that. A scientist would arrive who keeps repeating real blood. Alexia would ask him why he wants his blood, hoping that he would tell her for a foundation for injured children. However, this scientist is rude and tells him that it will be used to resurrect the demon, words that Alexia clearly does not understand. While we change the scene and we see our protagonist beaten by some soldiers who say that only he could have kidnapped the princess, they would continue being beaten, which further prompts our boss who says that this is the typical cliché of a background character getting more involved. The role allowing them to even stab blades in his masochistic leg did not come out. Our protagonist, although he is happy living his clichés of a background character. We return to Alexia to those who continue taking blood samples. She acts all frivolous, more or less like the Mura that the crazy scientist rejected him. He would start hitting the curse, but Alexia, to stop him, tells him to keep drawing blood. The goodness of Christ began to touch his heart, and the guy, so that he could continue having blood, would start feeding him, at least from hunger. He won't. To die Camos de Ken, we see Sinem visiting Princess Iris, Alexia's older sister. Does not say that due to the circumstantial evidence, Kagenou is not the main suspect, but due to his abilities, he would not be a match for Alexia, so after Kage's mothering him, they plan to release him. Lear is outside making a fuss because he wants his brother to be released, and last night they would release Kagenou, who is watched by a couple of guards. When he got off the train, a woman would pass by him and tell him that they would see him later in the room. Of our protagonist would meet Alpha, who, oh my god, what time do you go out for bread, would stop in a while. Alpha would tell him that they have investigated the cult more and have also increased the influences in their organization, but Kage does not say that he is sure that all they have normal lives, but he likes that sometimes they do little things like that just to make him feel in the game of the Eminence of the Shadows. He is like, but what a nice detail, Alba. Meanwhile, she undresses him. Richa would tell him that the Dark Knights are involved in the cult of devils, tells him to hide for a while, and that she will send him a message when they are ready. We change that level. We see Alexia, who is in quite precarious conditions after 5 days, although she would be observed for said curse. Meanwhile, Kay, who would not prepare his stage well, putting together everything that he managed to save by being Alexia's boyfriend. He was able to buy a couple of things to create a perfect environment, an environment worthy of Shadow, the Eminence in the shadows. So Delta would come to visit him, and our protagonist would begin his role. Elta informs him that he has reunited all the personnel available in the capital, that is, not all of them, but a total of 114 hired extras, or how they did it despite the large number. Delta even apologizes because more of them could not be mobilized with the stage set. Shadow says that it is the moment when the world knows him. Starting by killing the soldiers who tortured him before, while all that would be written by Delta in his book. Yes, in various points of the city, Shadow Garden would attack, demonstrating its immense power. All that chaos and destruction would resonate in the capital. The mad scientist would inject a little of Alexia's blood into the curse that would end up evolving little and would end up killing the scientist, but at the same time freeing Alexia, who is capable. But would end up meeting Xenon, who financed Lokio's research, and he was also the one who kidnapped Alexia, confirming that she was mentally ill. This guy would hit her in the face and remind her that her sister is much superior to her. But then they would hear some footsteps approaching, and from the shadows, Shadow would arrive, who does its typical presentation starting the battle. Meanwhile in the city, the bug would be causing great destruction, how no one can stop it. Princess Iris would arrive, who is considerably stronger than an average soldier. However, although she tries to make multiple cuts to prevent her from regenerating, she would be stopped by Alpha and tells him that he is only hurting him, which would detransform the curse with his mega attack, and said curse would take human form, revealing that said girl was the daughter of the man who had kidnapped Clara several years ago. Iris would tell him to wait, but Alpha, he tells her to be a good spectator, sit down and enjoy the show because it's coming and we don't talk about the summary. Meanwhile, Shadow would fight with Xenon, and obviously our protagonist is just playing. Alexia would notice the beauty of Shadow's swordplay. Being so ordinary, showing her the fencing that she always dreamed of. Xenon, upon seeing himself overcome, would take the ultra drug pills. Yes, more or less like the virus. However, not even with all that power is he a match for Shadow, who would use a technique that he brings from another world. Well, can generate atomic explosions in small spaces, music, sending a tremendous spectacle that would be seen by everyone. Iris would go in search of her sister after the explosion and they would make fun of each other, telling each other how much they love each other, and the next morning she would talk to our protagonist about the time he said that he liked her style of fencing. She thanks him and tells him that until then they have been a fake couple, but now she wants him to be her man, her macho, her official judge. If I am rejected by our protagonist, who receives rejection due to the rejection, tremendous sword blows, creating an urban legend in his school because there was a lot of blood in the bathrooms and no body nearby, becoming one of the 7 mysteries of the school. We changed the scene and we would see 5 of the 7 shadows in a meeting talking about the amazingly handsome, pitiful and widow who is our protagonist, planning how they will continue to act to stop the cult. However, they have a problem because there are people who are posing as Shadow Garden. Well, they kill people and leave little messages. However, outside of that there is no other trace. At that same moment Iris would speak with 2 loyal warriors and would tell them that the Order of Knights is corrupt, so he wants to put together a new investigation team to analyze this magical object that would be assigned to this girl named Sherry, who saw our brood all bleeding after Alexia's knife in some part of the capital. A man would be brutally attacked by one of the fakes who goes by the name of Shadow Garden, who looks a little peculiar because he keeps repeating that he is part of Shadow Garden as if he were under narcotic substances while at the academy. His friend's not name wants to know if he basically took Alexia to bed or if he at least gave her a kiss, but Kage doesn't say anything at all. He suggests going to Mitsugushi, a very modern place that sells things that have never been seen before. So the plans to go for chocolates with what they plan to make the girls fall in love with the girls, the little ones. We change scene and we see Princess Iris giving him the Sherry artifact and her father, the vice principal of that school, since his daughter is very intelligent, although she is also humble and a follower of Christ, all innocent. We would also know the new order that Iris joined, and they are the Crimson Knights, which has 2 members. Basically, we return to our protagonist who is lining up to enter said place, and they have to wait 80 minutes. To enter, our protagonist would be surprised by the architecture and the designs because it reminds him a lot of his past life, and all the people who want to enter are from the upper class. They would approach this girl who would take him to the protagonist with the excuse that they will take a survey. Our protagonist would follow her, and she would only be even more surprised by everything that is inside because it is basically a modern shopping center. Our protagonist would end up reaching the upper floor where the members of Shadow Garden are waiting for him, including another shadow, but he says that she created said place with the knowledge that the Great Shadow imparted to her when he rescued her here. Shadow would say that Gam is the most intelligent of the shadows, but also the most clumsy because she always trips. Shadow would sit on the throne that Gamma only prepared to feel what an eminence in the shadows is like. Shadow would ask if he is making good money. G would tell him that they do have several franchises throughout the kingdom, accumulating a capital of 100,000 million cinis, which is disappointing because he never managed to take advantage of all his knowledge of the another world, while G says that she knows because our protagonist is there because of the usurpers of the name Shadow Garden. Yes, obviously also Shadow says that he suspects who the culprit is by putting all Jot in the room because of the wisdom of our teacher, but he only imagines that everyone confused Alexia's knife that left the bleeding as a member of Shadow Garden. He needs to read a little more news before leaving. He would steal a gold coin for his expenses, and G would put his position on new, which is relatively new. Plus, they would give her 3 packages of chocolates totally free. They would start coming back, and K doesn't think it's very bad of Alexia that she's turning people away simply because of a rejection. It's just that he doesn't know anything about what's happening, but you would hear saber blows, so he pretends that he will have to in public, saying goodbye to his friends who swear not to reveal that dishonorable secret. He would go to see the talks he heard and find Alexia fighting against the fake Shadow Gardens, how to tell them apart and I'm the real ones. They have tremendous knowledge. Sorry, New would arrive and take one of them away for interrogation, while somewhere in the kingdom we would see this masked guy talking to the nugless plagiarists. The next morning everyone at school would talk about Kagenou, the guy who on public road Kagenou screwed up sons of, and while the time would come to deliver chocolates the blonde would fail to give it to a compromised woman, the head of the microphone, also because the girl to whom he proposes considers him a stalker, and because of all that information he brings no doubt arises to fulfill a rejection as a background character. You would be the first girl to appear, and conveniently it is Sherry who, after receiving the chocolates, would be left thinking 247J about our protagonist, and well, we would also see her father, who was previously a soldier and now he is sick. He would tell him that he has to give him an answer because that boy is surely waiting. Yes, of course, some time later the friends of our portal will sign him up for the Bushin tournament, where if he did well he would surely get a few Nen Norris. It's like that he already has more than 600 waiting for him. And then maybe he can also share some with his emerging friends. Later, he would meet again who tells him that he could not get any type of information from the subject he caught because they have brainwashed him and are recruiting poor children or orphans with magical power, and they have proof that there is one of them who did not fall under mental control but still works for them, and his name is Rex, from whom they can surely get information. However, our Sprout does not pay any attention and only thinks about the tournament where his friends entered him, saying that he doesn't need that, and he won't do it. And that maybe he himself can prepare the stage. She is like, oh, how wise my teacher is, but he is referring to the tournament stage. Taking advantage of that, our protagonist would retire, and I would think about what it would be like to have a normal life, although he says he prefers to live knowing the truth. We change the scene, and I am in the tournament where Clara would win his fight. Kage's friends would not be full with their bets, but let's say that luck is not on his side, being completely bankrupt. Now it would be our protagonist's fight against Rose, the president of the student council and the princess of the kingdom of Oriana, land of art and culture. Rose is considered the best extremist in the entire academy, so that our protagonist considers that it is the perfect moment to show the 48 master techniques that he has trained all this time. The combat would begin, and at full speed, he would chew a red thing while he would receive a blow from Ro flying out of there. And well, the techniques are the ways of being knocked down as a background character. However, he wants to look like a complete improviser who aspires to be the strongest because each time he gets up again, faking a total of bleeding but ready to show the remaining 47 techniques. And that's how the time would pass. Kage gets up showing a great spirit, drawing Rose's attention. So she prepared an attack that caused her to be stopped by the judge, who in her mind saved her life by taking Kagenou out on a stretcher with the remaining 33 techniques, but taking the respect of the princess and the entire public. Our rub would come out of the infirmary all bandaged, all mummified, and would be found by Sherry, who comes all and worried about our protagonist. However, like in all of mine, our Papucho doesn't even know who she is. Cherry would take her to eat, and I would give her a gift and introduce her to her father. Please, God, slow down, miss. I would also ask you to start as friends first of all. When our protagonist meets Sherry's father, who by the way is called Luther Barnett, who is the deputy director of the academy. And by the way, he is not Sherry's biological father, just an adoptive father. And well, Kagenou considers him a main character. Therefore, he considers that as a background character, he should not interact with him. They would tell our brother a little about Sherry's investigation. And well, just like that, the night would arrive. Sherry would return to her investigation, but our protagonist is still stuck, and she gets a little jealous that he has been with Alexia before. So she wanted to see her to find out if she has no feelings for Kagenou. And although the little princess says that she doesn't know, he notices the jealousy from afar. And Archie springs up. He would continue with his life as a background character, training as he did in his previous life. When the student council would arrive to explain about a vacancy that we are not interested in because in the shadows the same guy from the armor plans very macabre and malevolent things. And using this device, it would put a barrier around the school with which it takes away the magic of all the people. Our plot would notice it by its slime, and in that, they would be attacked by the fake Shadow Garden. Rose would put her chest. However, since he doesn't have magic, and these fugitives do break his sword, and when they were going to unlive the sea, he wouldn't jump, receiving the blow from Rose, dying instantly. In reality, no, because when he saw said attack, every terrorist was only excited to fulfill another dream, another cliché. And well, so that it doesn't all end there, she decides to sacrifice herself as a high NPC. I know our protagonist has something going. Rose would take his head and says she understands why he did it. Well, because Kagenou's love for her was so intense that he even gave his own life. This crazy woman has also just flashed. A tremendous story. They would take all the students away, taking them as kings, while Kagenou would begin to make a mistake of himself coming back to life because his secret technique was the death of 10 minutes, a technique that puts in danger highly her life. Well, if it had gone wrong, she would have died in the hands of an NPC. It would be caused with a little magic, because even if the magic is retained in that place, it can be used in very slight doses. We changed the scene, and the Kawi would be attacked by Rex, the bad guy, who is coming for the artifact he was studying. However, he would be protected by the Crimson Order, which is very cool. Don, saying that he will kill him because he is stronger. The Pokemon Master would tell Sherry to escape, while Kagenou, from the roof, would look at all the animals. And I would say that the knights are outside, but because of the fact that there is no magic, they do not dare to enter. Plus, there are several Francos on all the roofs of the institution, and looking at that whole scene as an eminence of the shadows is something to be dismissed as her wish list. But she won't do anything until it's dark, and it's a setting worthy of the shadows. So in the meantime, I would start undoing the imposters with a slingshot of slime that takes up little magic, and I would help Sherry get there because she's around the hallways with a kill me sign on her back for being totally careless and making all the noise in the world. But with the protagonist car, there is nothing to worry about, and it would also fulfill the cliché of jumping from the roof. And well, the red-haired girl is really hallucinating because she hears things, but she says that maybe she only imagined them. Intelligence is after you. But you are faster. Damn, she would trip and be held by Kagenou, who tells her that she doesn't have to talk to herself out loud because apart from schizophrenic, it makes a noise in the middle of an attack. Look where you are walking, and those slippers make only noise. Besides, Homer, you are dumb as a stone and ugly as a blasphemy. In the experimental room, she would say that the object that possibly blocked the magic is called the Madman of Greed, an object that is used to observe the energy of all the Dark Knights and that is capable of remembering frequencies of magical energy which it will not absorb. Basically, it can block all magic except the ones you choose yourself, being the reason why some of the bad knights also could use magic. And well, if the orb exceeds the limit of absorbed energy, it would explode the entire Datado Academy that only Sherry and her father know. While this finger spinner is what helps control said eye, being that Sherry finally knows how it works. However, she needs to finish refining the artifact, but since you have your tools, Kay does not offer to go look for them. Meanwhile, RoboCop would threaten Rex for letting said artifact escape, so he would go look for Sherry. But on the way, he would meet Shadow, who stops him. Not to make a long story short, he tells him the same thing as all the generic villains that have come out, and he tells him that he will defeat him, that his magic is very stupid and all the suck, but Shadow would kill him without any difficulties by taking him to the living room of his lack of trust. I do not live there. He would meet and who confesses to him that that Crimson Soldier was called Marco and was his fiancée. But our protagonist is worth 3 dates of Berengina, and he told him that there are only 7 shadows that could fight at the same level without magic, which is why he is seeing how to end that barrier. But Shadow says that he only comes for some tools that will serve to finish refining the control of the Eye of Greed, which makes him surprised because Shadow's wisdom goes further and he is capable of refining in a few minutes an object that would take years of research, that is thanks to the privileges of the protagonist. Meanwhile, the night would come, and the Dark Knights still undecided whether or not to enter the academy, while all the students tell Rose that it is time to start a revolution and rise up against them. We changed the scene, and finally, the refinery of the object ended, so Sherry would go through some secret tunnels to use the object and free everyone from that anti-magic barrier, remembering the time she found her mother was not alive and having seen the generous arm that picked her up and cared for her like a daughter, referring to the deputy director. So, holding her ovaries, she would go to fulfill her mission. The players are worried that Rex and the rest of the fakers who show no signs of life will not arrive. Sherry would arrive that would activate the control, annulling the magic barrier, starting the revolution, starting the chaos of a wild battle in which Rose would fight with everything and more, inspired by her man, by her male, by her Kagenou, massive breasts. But when she was outnumbered, Shadow would arrive to rescue her along with Shadow Garden. They would blow up the imposters. However, a big fire would start caused by the masked man outside. Iris asks Rose what happened. She would tell him that Shadow Garden stopped the terrorists, which makes Iris even more upset. Meanwhile, Kage wouldn't go see the guy in the armor and ask him why the costume. Well, he figured out that the person hiding behind that suit was Deputy Director Lutheran Barnett. He wouldn't ask him why he did all that, and he would tell him that he was the biggest badass there. Well, with the sword and fencing, no one stopped them until he got sick. He financed a despised researcher who was Sherry's mother. And when he finally got the artifact he longed for to return to his glory days, she said that it was dangerous and there was what to give to the government, but since he was a fan of my law, he replied, "Long live freedom, damn it," and he ended up unliving it. I mean, those weren't those words, but more or less that's how it happened. Sherry never realized who the real killer of her mother was, since then he also began to use Sherry. He would start the battle and this old man is crazy because he saw Cid Kagenou, but he only wanted that exit to change his clothes and make his entrance as Shadow, the Eminence in the shadows. He would use all the power of the artifact, and after a few hits, Shadow would defeat him in front of Sherry, who would cry for losing her father because Shadow does not want to tell her the truth and prefers that she lives in an illusion. The entire Shadow Garden Association would understand that to fulfill their purposes they should fight against the world, and well, there are no sides like good and evil. The next morning Sherry Maria Kage not to say goodbye because she will go abroad to study and investigate, and although she does not tell him to plan her revenge against Shadow so the vacation due to the state of the facilities, obviously they are not going to burn down their schools, he would spend it avoiding his sister and being very bored until he received a letter from Alpha. Meanwhile, we would see the rest of the shadows. We would meet Epsilon, a shadow that is flatter than the board of one and using the slime she puts patting on her breasts and buttocks, remembering the teachings of the great shadow who taught the power of slime, a power that changes her destiny, although I am sure he was not referring to that destiny but well nature one. I guess we would see Beta, who is writing a book about the time she rescued Shadow Alexia, but putting her as the main character. The next morning she wouldn't meet Beta and our short hair would tell him that Shad is looking at him more than his false figure supposedly catches his attention. We would change 10 and we see Iris with Alexia. You shop at the Shadow Shopping Center where they talk about the visit that Alexia will make to the church to be able to discover the things that the Archbishop is up to and the disappearances of the orphans. At last someone who thinks about the orphans. In that case, Gamma would arrive, who would use a false name, in this case, Luna, and would attend to them personally. They tell you that Alexia will go on a trip to the sacred land, so Gam offers to select elements that Alexia may need. I would say that he is looking for something different, and I would take the lingerie and thongs section that says they are for the enjoyment of men, which is why Alexia says that she is going to try them on. The thing is that Iris doesn't want her to take them because she shows a lot, although the more the better, and having a fairly northern scene, Alexa would receive approval to buy some Brazilian thongs. I just hope that 20 women haven't tried on 20 women before her. We change scenes and see Rose remembering what happened after the fire, well, not later. From the battle with the warlike and macabre deputy director, Makia, he would go to the infirmary where Rose goes to look for him, hoping to find the boy who gave his life for the love he felt for her. Oh God, If he only knew that it was only to fulfill his masochistic dreams as a character, and bottom line the thing is that she would find him all bandaged and would say that it is a miracle of love, which is why she accepts all his feelings since he gave her her life, and she will give him her heart wrong, which brings us to the present with our protagonist addressing the sacred land with Rose, who walks tighter than gum, but I feel more uncomfortable than an otaku at a social gathering. How they got there you will wonder. Well, he bought an economy class ticket and they conveniently met there, and she snuck into the plan while Rose is all cheesy and our Preta would ask her about the divine teaching, the most famous religion where they idolize the goddess Beatrice. She explains that this goddess gave powers to the 3 legendary heroes who accumulated wealth despite their humble beginnings in order to marry the princesses of the different kingdoms, thinking that perhaps this is the solution for the relationship between the two of them. Well, if Kagenou passes the goddess's test, then Rose will be able to talk about Kagenou to her father. Although, well, our brother only thinks that he wants to convert his religion to him. But he always trusts in Christ the King. They would arrive at the sacred land of Leng, and I would tell him about the hero Oliver who cut off the demon king's arm, and now they trade keychains with that arm. But what the hell? Shark minds. While passing through the city they would find a book signing by Natsu M. Sensei, the author. Rose's favorite, because apart from writing various genres such as romance, action, fantasy, the author is so fresh that it seems that they are different authors, and of course because Kage would not see the titles of the books, finding herself with the surprise of seeing Little Red Riding Hood, Cinderella, Romeo and Juliet, Woman, Pretty Woman. The thing is that the author behind all this is not a reborn as our protagonist thinks, but rather Beta herself, of whom Zero feels totally disappointed for being a plagiarist and abusing the stories she told him not to be inspired, but to copy herself completely. She would give him a book saying that inside are Alpha's instructions. Although since it is in ancient language, our protal gives him a little urge to investigate what he said, and at night Alpha would go to the cathedral to get answers from the Archbishop, who already had a better life because he had to die before he reached Alpha. From above, our protagonist would be watching one of the criminals die, and he would meet Epsilon, who mentions that the Archbishop was killed by the executioner, who unfortunately went into hiding, and they only managed to eliminate her cases, so they will proceed with Plan B. Kagenou doesn't understand what the hell is going on, but he pretends that yes Plan B, but if you know what that means. I may have sounded intimidating, but in reality he sucked her egg, and he realized that Epsilon is all covered in slime. We change the scene and our proto is preparing to go to the thermal baths, where he shows us the body of a Greek god who is loaded with abs in his abs. Our protagonist would relax without realizing that Alexia was stuck there. She was completely confused, and she would tell him that she was glad that she was okay after the knife she received. She talked for a while about the event of the goddess test, but she doesn't tell him that she doesn't know what Alexia is. I would explain to her that it is celebrated every year. Well, the sanctuary opens its doors for a fighting ritual, because if you are strong enough you would be able to summon an ancient warrior who will fight against you, since he would basically fight against ghosts, but who cares about that when you have tremendous pixels of Alexia sex. Well, the thing is that he says that a China Ranty sword managed to summon Oliver, however he did not defeat him. They would also talk about the Archbishop, and Alexia would tell him that with his premature murder he was going to lose her investigation. Although since Kage is not a nobody, she cannot give him more details. She would tell him that she thought that Kage would not take the opportunity to look at her all rich. He tells her that at 11 he avoids looking at people for everyone's comfort, like a gentleman, but he asks him to please not look at Excalibur anymore. Excalibur, that thing that looks more like a little worm. Take it down a notch. Don't judge a book by its cover, because he tells him that sometimes what looks like a simple little worm is just hidden in its pod, surprising us. Embarks on a search for the Garden of Chaos. Poet has left us. Would start the tournament. This old man with a mustache and bald named Jack Nelson is the interim archbishop, who would tell the story of Oliver and everything that Alexia already explained to us. Who would remember what this old man told her? They already knew that she was only there to investigate, but with the death of the archbishop it is no longer necessary. Well, now it is an interim issue for the church, so she is disappointed that she was not able to do her audit. And she is right in the box next to Natsume, The writer known to us as Beta sorry for making a mistake earlier, who she doesn't trust for having such a perfect personality and character, and well, let's say that Alexia doesn't like Beta either because she is jealous that she has already been the real lady in danger whom Shadow rescued and with whom she spent a good amount of time. Her busty man. The test would begin and people would comment that some have died doing the test while others, like these NPCs, would simply never manage to summon anyone who not only imagines how he could enter epically like Shadow, and everyone is left thinking about how strong he is. So the contestants would continue passing until after so many failures they would end up surprisingly calling Cid Kagenou to arena, who was obviously registered by rosy hopes that he will achieve a feat to have a great future at his side without. However, despite the rumored calls from the public in the stands, Kagenou would not appear because he would be thinking about his options. The first is to enter the arena and invoke the Go Shade, but seeing that they would discover him, he would stop. The second option would be to escape, but he decided to the third make a grand entrance as Shadow, since his power would cause a mega invocation bringing the Witch of Calamity Aurora, who once brought chaos and destruction to our world because she was very good and diabolical. All of this would be explained to us by Beta, surprising everyone, including the Archbishop, whom she seduces to tell her a little more about her since there are no records left, and she would tell him that only a select group of the church knows about her and she highly doubts that Shadow is a rival for her. The battle would begin where she seemed to be superior because she attacks him with blood blades. However, Kagero would only be watching to quickly end her attack by giving up and telling her that I wish she had fought when she had all her power. That fight would make the priest tremendously angry, and after the fight a door would open. Very macabre. Alpha would say that the sanctuary responded to his call. The door would follow Shadow, and no matter how much he moved, the door followed him. So he decided to enter. For the door to lower its intensity, we change the scene and return to the arena where the Archbishop says that the sanctuary responded to Shadow's call. However, he says that there are two doors, one good and one evil. So they decide to cancel the rest of the fights, and when they were going to retreat, he would arrive at Shadow Garden. Alexia would recognize Alpha and say that he is much stronger than her sister. You have no idea. So they would proceed to go through said door, and Epsilon would stop the princesses by threatening to kill Beta. And although Alexia says that it would be better to let her die, and let's say that Beta's performance is not the best of all, Shadow Garden plans to take the Archbishop out the door. However, the old man would call you his Pinot Executioner, who attacks Epsilon. When he sees that he cuts off his plastic boobies, turns into acting quickly so that they do not see that they are fake, using all that rage to unlive Al. Poor Venancio, and yes, that's how all the princesses stayed when we saw that they brought Natsume. They would also go into the portal when it was about to close, obviously becoming a burden for them. Although well, the tasty Alpha wouldn't say buts, rather, she says that it's good that she finds out about it. What really happens? Alpha wants the old man to answer his questions about the demon's arm and about the great heroine. Olivier, not Oliver, just because. In reality, all this time she was a woman with the same face as Alpha. The bald man is surprised. The shadows also mention that they already know everything about the possessed and that they not only want to bring those macabre life back to the Demon King. So they enter a vortex that keeps all the memories and ancestral memories about the demonic corners. Yes, I'm not understanding anything either. But at least there is health. But well, let's go back to the protagonist who arrives at a room where he would find Aurora, the Witch of Calamity, who asks about the fight they had before and tells him that his memories are incomplete. So he doesn't. He would ask if he knows how to get out of there, but she tells him that she has no memory of ever getting out since she is wearing a straitjacket. She would ask him for his help, and Kage would not free her. Aurora tells him that they are both looking for something similar to getting out, and she would be free. So they agree to collaborate. Aurora would also explain to her that the sanctuary, said prison of memory, was created from the ancestral battles. So they must reach the core of the place to destroy it so that she can be freed, although she emphasizes that the safest thing to do is that when the sanctuary disappears, she will too. However, that would be a way in which the protagonist could escape. However, She also emphasizes that it will be a little difficult for them because they cannot use magic in that place since the moment of using it is absorbed. Reconfirms. Send her again that once she is freed, she will fade into nothingness. We return to Alpha, who walks around the place and explains to them that what they see are Olivier's memories, where most of them died because they could not tolerate the treatments. However, only a handful of children, our Prat, survived by closing one of his eyes. While he walks with Aurora through his memories, we return to Alpha, who tells that Olivier was one of the few survivors and one of the few children compatible with demon cells that used the left arm of the Demon King. Devils, an arm which Olivier cut because although her supposed mission was to kill devils, the only thing he asked her was to bring her cells since the cult was looking for more power. And just to give you an idea, this arm is crazy, the arm of the devil's jackets apparently. And then the serious scientists sealed it and used it to create those all-doped pills that the virus used at the evening. Alpha, also showing his memories of Olivier, would show them that one of the scientists behind it would be this bald old man who he was looking for immortality and for a body not to age. You almost asked me. I don't think he achieved it. I would force him to reveal the name of those illicit substances, very illegal, and he would reveal that they are called devil pearls, and for them to take effect, you have to take it once a year. However, they can only produce a small amount, a total of 12, the same amount as the cult leaders. The old man would go crazy and activate his schizophrenia, but Delta would stop him from living, or so we would believe, because he would come back stronger and end up separating them in different rooms, attacking Alpha and Delta with his clones Naruto. Delta would start killing everyone. However, his magic is affected, and the slime starts to dissolve. I always support the old man. That man was a visionary. A lot of clothes, and well, Delta is excited to see many prey to hunt. We are also just as excited. Shadow would continue traveling through memories with Aurora because they have to save their little girl to be able to leave the room. However, they would be attacked by zombies. On the other hand, Epsilon would explain to them, the other girls, that the memories from there materialize for them. The possessed ones would arrive at an entire room full of records of the other possessed ones, and Epsilon is grateful for having met Shadow, and since they know that those memories will not be able to take them with them, they would use a camera, which is obviously an invention brought by Shadow from his other life. However, the lack of magic would also begin to affect them, giving us whimsical scenes because they must be more careful in how they use their magic, since the silicones end up falling off at Epsilon, which would pretend to intimidate waves that do not. Nothing happen. Shadow would take care of all the zombies who see both him and Aurora as a virus in a TR program, living Aurora's memory, so they would get to the center. But we would change Ken and return with Delta, who begins to awaken the furry desires of many from here and almost whoever monetizes the video, and apparently Delta's magic does not end. However, in large part it is because of her killer instincts. We return with Shad, who says that those chains will not allow them to pass, and the most likely thing is that they can only be cut by that sword. However, to apply the cliché, that sword must be used by someone worthy of the hero, and obviously, our Sprout is not. We would see Alexia, who doubts that Delta works for Shadow. Well, he is someone with a style of impeccable fight, but Delta is basically violent because of its unbridled sensuality. Words more, words less. Delta would manage to break that room. When the old man finds himself cornered, he would remember Oliver, whom he called in despair, managing to summon her. But in that, the Epsilon team would also come to say that they already have all the information they came to look for, so whenever they want, they can leave. So they would open a portal to leave there. The old green Revo would receive a notification that there is someone breaking into the center of the sanctuary. He thinks it is a good time to let off some steam by playing with that intruder. Oh, little thing. Meanwhile, Shad saw Aurora chatting. She tells him that even if she disappears, it would feel like achieving her freedom because she prefers that to being locked up in a place where memories are only repeated. In that, they would come from a portal, a great power. Our brute thinks that the hero is the real protagonist, turning out to be just the bald old man with an alpha-like elf whom our brode is willing to face. However, she is very superior. Oh, That makes us believe. Well, once her strength was proven, she would even allow me to do it a cut since our protagonist says that a battle without talking gives him courage. Aurora prevents him from stopping because no human could defeat her. And as a thank you for the memories that Shadow gave him, she says that she will help him escape so that at least he survives. Shadow tells them he would interrupt and be slaughtered by Olivier, or so we are led to believe. Well, he bites her out of life. And yes, I know something is wrong with our protagonist. But what can be done to him? The old man does not understand how our protagonist survived. And instead of telling him that it is thanks to the privileges of the protagonist, he would tell him that the human body is something incredible since it is super resistant when the vital points are protected, and biting him was only to fulfill one of his sick and schizophrenic dreams of being stabbed to kill someone totally unsuspecting. The old man congratulates him to defeat a copy of poor quality, so using the accumulated magical force of the sanctuary, he would bring hundreds of Olivier with which our prot would activate all his magic. Well, all this time that he closed his eye was simply to be able to concentrate his magical energy. He would activate his field of strength, and while he is stabbed again, he would say, ending the sanctuary. He would wake up in the forest where Aurora would say goodbye to him, thanking him for the memories, giving him the kiss of goodbye. Later, Alexia would talk to Rosie Beta, saying that not even her kingdoms. They were able to distinguish what was right and what was wrong, and sincerely they do not know anything about Shadow Garden of the organization they fight against. So Alexia proposes a union between Rose, the Princess of Oriana, Natsume, a great writer with many connections, and her as the Princess of Midgar to be able to investigate and collect information, and once they have all the information, they can unite the three forces and thus counterattack. Basically, a friend of yours was sent with a business in mind to the Natsume Beta. OB Beta would tell him that he does not have a solid plan, basically but I agree to join the final. Well, it will be an infiltrated person from Shadow Garden. So well, it didn't start with Alexia's group. But well, we changed the scene, and we see Alpha talking to Epsilon, very grateful to the one above that his boss is so wise. Well, he disintegrated the entire sanctuary without leaving traces, only a tremendous hole somewhere else. Kama would be negotiating the purchase of land to expand the shopping centers. At that point, they would come and tell him that after the studies they did, they confirmed that under there is oil in those lands, which is why Gamma agrees to buy from this poor man who is desperate to have all the land and all the nearby houses invested in his city, in addition to offering to rebuild the city under his terms, promising to turn it into the largest city, and God Alpha would remember his humble beginnings, the construction of the first house of the Seven Shadows thanks to Shadow, his first base of operations where the Great Shadow imparted a little more of his wisdom to them. But he would interrupt those beautiful memories because Gam found out that the King of Oriana. She goes with the Royal Chancellor called the Perverted Idiot, who decides that they will visit Midgard, so they have to be attentive. We would have a little more fan service where Iris tells her sister how angry she is because her father doesn't want to get into trouble with her. Church and the frustration is great at not being able to control a power as abysmal as the one that this shadow guy presents. So he says that if they appear at the Bushin festival, whether it be the cult or Shadow Garden, they will have to defeat him. Oh my daughter, pure dream you bring. While that under the rain we would see Rose, who continues training, remembering the fencing of the guy who saved her many years ago. However, she would feel pulsations in her chest that leave her uneasy. So the Bushing festival would arrive, and our prod observes the participants from the heights having a cliché dream that we would all like to fulfill, entering as the weak rookie, but out of nowhere, demonstrating all his great ability, basically, being the rookie out of nowhere who becomes the biggest. From there, he would go visit Gam to help him with this matter. Well, when the Great Shadow visits her, he asks her for a favor. Our protagonist asks her to help him with a costume. However, she has something better, and it is an invention based on the slime that he created, using this machine that can change the physiognomy of a face. Shad would choose the face of a man called the Common Man for the Mafia. Taking advantage of the fact that they have somewhat similar factions, the machine would turn out to be a complete success, and with a little acting, It would look like a guy with no soul or future, more or less like you right now. We change the scene here. We would meet Anarosa, a swordsman who came to summon a warrior in the test of the goddess, who would see a man as, and seeing him as a totally sick person, recommends him not to fight in the tournament because the damage he receives could be irreparable. I would say that he doesn't judge a book by its cover, and that's when this gorilla would go so far as to tell him that he was a fool who would give him a madrasa to make him see. Although our brata had one way to beat him, he allows him to beat him up since he is committed to his role, and Rose would be surprised to see him without any scratches, seeing him as someone interesting. Later, our goal to eat with Azel, who wants funds for his bets, because speaking of funds, we do not have funds. Although we know that those bets never turn out well at night, he would find with Rose, who tells him that she comes from a kind of medieval McDonald's, yes, the same one from the medieval Happy Meal. They chat for a while, and Kagenou doesn't know how to get rid of her. Rose tells him that her father will introduce her to her fiancé. The perverted idiot also explains to him that in her kingdom people do not see a rose that carries swords. However, she decided to take that path when she saw the beautiful Eskrima of a mysterious guy who saved her in the past. She would ask Kagenou to trust her. He would love her even if he sees from a distance that he totally sucks an egg. However, before he leaves, our protagonist would give him a hamburger, this gesture being something that Rose would keep for herself. The next day they would begin the first preliminary phases. He would lose money as usual. They would know the goal of the Dorado, a very famous guy for never having lost a fight, who has the ability to measure the level and strength of his opponents. He would give him some tips to know who is going to win or underestimating our pra. He is a common man. He only has 30 power. However, he wins his fight. Although no one was able to see how he defeated him, and they could only see that he stumbled and fell. Although among those present was Anne Rose, who was able to see. Or at least she thinks she knows what happened. Well, in the blink of an eye, he saw that a common man hit him with a tremendous punch in the jaw, sending him to sleep, and although the narcissistic blonde's prediction failed, he turned it around, leaving him as the baby's daddy. The next morning, you would arrive to look for our protagonist because he tells him that he is Rose being wanted by everyone since she brings him the news that she is on the run. According to the newspaper, she killed her fiancé Yuyo. However, through a conversation between Alex and Delta, we do not find out that the Kingdom of Oriana wants to treat this matter as something internal, and let Midgard not interfere. But Alexia is talking. Sister, I do believe you. So he wants to find her first to hear her version, even if Natsume doesn't agree so much. Alexia would end up retiring, and then a shadow would arrive with a report to Beta. I would explain that Rose is in the underground escaping, and that for the moment she is pressing her chest, which raises their suspicions that Rose could also be possessed. And at the festival, Kage would not read about the news, and while the blonde does not stop losing money. And leaving there, he would meet an elf who tells him that our protagonist has a peculiar elf smell. She would ask him if he knows any elf who looks like her. How many alphas are there? Damn. Although, well, Kage tells us that he doesn't know anyone similar. And although she attacks him, he remains in his role as a background character. The elf will apologize, and holding his hand, she will tell him that one day she will be very strong, since she can feel it elsewhere. We would see Anne Rose, who talks to the barkeep about the common man. Well, not even they are able to see all his movements, so they think he uses some magical artifact boy. They would also talk about the next rival of common man, Golden El Dorado, who has never lost a fight, not because he is very strong, but because he has the power to see the level of combat of his rivals. When he knows that he cannot win, he simply runs away or surrenders. However, it helped him gain the reputation that he has never lost. In a fight, a common man would give him a morbid dance, breaking his neck, and Golden neither. Using all his power, he was able to defeat him. Well, with a simple sneeze he sent him flying. But there would be major problems with the King of Oriana, who is a little strange. Just a little, because it seems that he is under control or under illicit substances. Since he is perverted, answers all the questions. In the name of the king who is flying, common man would continue winning fights, which little by little is causing a stir in the public. Although it is good that he is all schizophrenic, writing to his friends only to ask them for money, to ask them for cash, instead to go and recover the lost money by working honestly in the tunnels. Rose would tell the common man to retire because she will be his opponent in the next battle, and he doesn't want to hit her with a tremendous dance, tremendous beautiful yoga. However, for him to do something more epic is, he would remove tremendous pieces that he was carrying in front of him, saying that now he will give everything. Although she also tells him that he can break his neck like him. Okay, I don't know where we are going with this. Meanwhile, returning to the real problems in the underground, Rose would fight against several soldiers at the same time, trying to escape, so we would arrive the next morning. Ruby would go look for our protagonist again to tell him that they are going to rescue Rose, since this way they will get a reward, and since he owes a lot of money from the bets, and Kage is not a great friend, he will allow him to keep everything. Kagenou would see that his sister was approaching, so he proceeded to go in search of Rose just to avoid his sister while walking the streets. He would hear a peculiar song and tell us that in his previous life he learned piano by obligation. Although some time later he came to see it as a benefit, I feel that what he is listening to at that moment is Beethoven's Sonata No. 14, a piece that he considers perfect for an eminence in the shadows. He would go to look for the place where the song comes from, thinking about the possibility of that there are more reincarnated people, even though it is none other than Epsilon, who is also using the knowledge that the protagonist brought from other authors, becoming someone influential as a composer, something that outrages the protagonist of the game of tremendous plagiarism. Shadow would ask her about Rose, and she tells him no. He knows a lot about his case, only that he is in the underground. So Shadow would steal the piano from the Hugar to make a grand entrance and add atmosphere to the place. Well, Rose, while she has flashbacks of what happened, is seeing her father in such a deplorable state because of the pervert, while the cursed power manifests itself more and more in her. However, that paper of the hamburger that Kagenou, her first love, gave her is the thing that gives her the strength to continue walking, guided by the sound of a piano, encountering a tremendous scene and tremendous atmosphere that Shadow put on. But what a great topic to chat there in a while. Shadow asks her if she will stop fighting. She answers never. So, Shatu says that he will lend her a little of his power, which would eliminate the manifestation of the curse and would give her supernatural strength with which she is able to kill many members of the cult. Moments after meeting Alexei Natsume in the underground, who went to look for her, however, Rose says that she will follow the path that she believes in and asks them not to interfere. Alex would try to stop her, but Rose would knock her out and ask Natsume to take care of her, who wishes her success on her path. Perhaps although the approach is different, her objectives are the same. While the question of how a piano disappeared in the middle of the day will not let him sleep that night, poor Lord, after all that work, Kagenou would arrive at his inn, meeting outside with his sister, who is upset that our protagonist ignores her and has not gone with her on vacation. But he wants her little brother to go see her in her tournament, since she was designated by Midgar and Month of Rose, giving her an ultra mega pip ticket where the innate cream of the nation goes, the most select of the select. And the next morning she would meet Princess Iris, who apologizes for everything that happened before due to the issue of his sister. However, the fact that the princess apologizes to him does not make him a background character, chatting there for a while and other NPCs who accompany him and say that he should not set high expectations or dream of great things instead of telling them. And whoever decided it thanked them for the advice. He would ask, what do you think about the common man? And while everyone says that he is a sick person with bad posture who will not achieve anything in the pit and that he is there based on luck words who meet the expectations raised by Kagenou, he would retire. Well, the next fight will be with Anaros. However, on the way, he would meet again with the elf who introduces herself as Beatrix, the goddess of war, the winner of the first festival, with whom they exchange a little food, and that would be the combat that we wait for at the box. A pervert would arrive that chats with, making us a little uncomfortable. But let's go to the real battle, to the Gamazos, and starting the combat Onder uses everything he has. However, he would be greatly outnumbered by our protagonist, who hits her with a completely crazy dance, ending up defeating her, leaving the audience stunned. The average man does not have any style of fencing marked by any school, something that worries him. Pervert. Iris says that she will also be able to defeat him with secrets and everything. Oh, how much perverted optimism would withdraw and send one of his henchmen to investigate Common Man for the gang because he fears that tomorrow he will interfere in his plans, or worse yet, that he will be involved with Shadow Garden. After the fight, Common Man would meet with Rose, who she thanks him for that bath of humility. Although I would call it a morbid bath that hit her. Well, now she is all inspired to become stronger. Iris would also go around, and we would see in the distance a mysterious elf whom Iris approaches, finding out that she is Beatrix. Our protagonist would leave happy because he has fulfilled almost all his objectives, but when he arrives at his inn again, he would meet Clara and two in hell, all angry that he has disappeared again. Meanwhile, at the ruined academy, Rose would arrive, who changes her clothes and gets ready for the next day while still holding that hamburger paper of her male subman. On the other side, Iris would feel the pressure of winning that fight because this girl was always considered a prodigy capable of defeating a commander with a single blow. And as she grew up, they filled her with praise, but despite her power, her status as a princess caused her to be more protected. How when they did not allow her to enter the institution, when there was that anti-magic barrier, or when Alpha showed that being far superior to her, and also the time that her father considered her too impulsive when it came to making decisions. The next morning, Iris would meet Kagenou, with whom to chat in a while, and our protagonist recommends putting milk and sugar in the coffee to make a tasty coffee with milk, and he hasn't tried it. No. And he puts the coffee and I put the milk. Oh, what for these princesses is really healthy. They would hear voices at the entrance, and they are pure NPCs that do not allow Beatrix to enter. Iris would say that her guest, introducing her as Beatrix, the goddess of war, everyone would go to see her and cheer her, and Kage would not feel like the most irrelevant background character fulfilling her objective. She would say that Kage will not be very strong in the future, something that everyone else doubts because in his school he is meaner than the average. On the other hand, a pervert would be giving the king a bad substance. Rem laughs. To keep him under control? Yes, almost as macabre as Jafar. They would take him to the festival because they hope that Rose will make an appearance to try to save her father, and in case that doesn't happen, they want to take advantage of the opportunity so that in the midst of the commotion they can unlive the king of Midgar, and if not possible also turn him into their puppet like the king of Oriana, seeking to take advantage of the Battle of Iris to launch their entire diabolical plan. How macabre. Although there is another detail that worries Mundane Man because they did change his name in the subtitles in the last chapters, but we would continue calling him Common Man, who he suspects comes from the underworld. When he is about to reach his seats, Beatrix would say that they stink. He would ask that I kicked her out, but Iris would introduce her guest to Beatrix, the goddess of war, which makes the pervert really mad. Lair would move on to the next round and Iris's turn would come. And with all the burden she has, she says she won't give it a second to reveal any secret he has, ending him in one fell swoop. Where would he have heard that before? However, he would also have a premonition of his deviance and retreating abruptly. Although the Common Man never took a single step, Iris could not do anything before him. Meanwhile, Rose would arrive, who gave her clearing the path where Beta is waiting and tells her to continue on her way and complete her mission, and thus the fight would continue. She would stay behind in the middle, and the constant visions of being unlived. She would think that perhaps she is the most powerful person in the world, but listening to the comments of the public who do not understand what is wrong with him, he would concentrate all the power he has by activating his super mode Pache Lintus, or old women throwing themselves with everything, but he sees that his sword is not in its sheath. Coming out of said illusion, Common Man would block his sword with one hand and he would put her against the ground, telling her that he is just beginning. The king would leave there, perverted, he is ad, and at that moment Rose would arrive, who bows down and apologizes to her father, requesting forgiveness not only for the mistakes she made but for what her father will commit. Recovering the little consciousness he has left, he would give her his forgiveness. Pervert would complain because he did not order that. However, he would not give her more time because Rose would end up stabbing her own father, since the pervert used him as a shield, being his last words, "Rose, I love you." Rose would plan to go out of her way, but she would be saved by a Common Man who reveals that he is actually Shadow. At that moment, she would start fighting against Beatrix, and Rose would notice that her swordsmanship is the same as that of the elegant bandit hunter. Well, when he was a child and he saved bandits for fun, he saved Rose by accident, wanting to, So she confesses that she took the path of the sword. Thanks to him, Shadow would tell her that their fight still does not end. He does not finish words with which Rose escapes because he still has to live, while Shadow would be attacked by Beatrix, the goddess of war, with a shock wave of her forces causing great destruction. Iris would join the battle, who planned to use the mithril blade, a sword, ultra power, ultra oh my eyes. Shadow tells him that he did not expect that. She relies on a crutch to fight at her level, which turns her into a. However, Shadow is able to give herself a 2-on-1 without problems, while Rose doesn't know whether to return to her country or simply escape in that series wanted by Alpha, who invites him to fight alongside Shadow Garden. But if Ross wants them to save his kingdom from Oriana, he must prove his worth, seeing this as the only alternative he has left to save his kingdom. Meanwhile, Shadow's battle against the waifus would continue. Everything is chaos, everything is destruction. Shadow would continue to add fuel to the fire, telling Iris that she does not even deserve to be remembered for her memory. Shadow would shine throughout the fight, and since Beatrix is the only one who fights at a level close to a Shadow, not even Shadow Iris would try to immobilize him by taking a tremendous blow to the jaw without accepting the abysmal difference in power. So, Shadow, after laughing like a Gira, would put his force field around Midgard, saying that the game is over, ending with the magic words "but don't be scared." He would retire, saying, "I just wanted to make a little show," being all that helplessness and frustration that makes Iris cry. Somewhere else abroad we would see Sherry, all schizophrenic, investigating, obsessed with Shadow, while Pervert would have to report that his mission failed and that Rose is still missing, commenting all this to a subject whose face we cannot distinguish. The Shadows would be happy with the results of Shadow since it complies with everything it proposes. Although I would say that it is what occurs to it on the fly. The GAM shopping center would do the reconstruction of the Little Boss Academy, while Kage does not find out that he went to change to recover all the money he lost in gambling. Rose would arrive the domain of Kagenou's father while she remains hopeful in the hamburger wrapper. The Shadows would take him to the deepest part of the forest where you remember this poorly made house, because the Shadows turn it into a huge operations center where she will begin training, with her being number 666 in her ranks. As it is a new restart, they would cut off all her clothes and all her belongings, getting rid of everything, including the only memory of his beloved Kagenou, and the first season of Eminence in Shadow would end. If you want me to bring the second season when it finishes being released, leave it in the comments. Leave your like and subscribe for the next part.